Today, we're going to be talking about enterprise NFTs. And this is a really popular topic. And we just want to infuse our own thoughts into here. We've been involved in tokenization, as I'll explain in the next couple of slides. We've been involved in tokenization for the past couple of years. So it's really great to see what I would think right now is like mainstream tokenization. And I'm okay with it being in digital art. And what the purpose of this here is, we're going to have a really interesting agenda to cover. It's going to cover three major topics, and I'll go through in the next slides in the next couple of seconds. But essentially, there's so much more to non-fungible token use than just digital art. And hopefully that we convey this message properly over the next couple. Without further ado, here we're going to be talking about enterprise NFTs. And my name is Dan Norkin. I'm a co-founder here at Envision Blockchain. Just a little plug about myself. I do like to put a lot of content out into the world. You can follow me on Twitter at Daniel Norkin. I'm also on TikTok, putting TikTok videos about blockchain. This is all that we do. So at Daniel Norkin, and you probably get the drift. So at my name, and you can find me all over the social media channels. A quick call to action. I just want to put this out here. We are members of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and there is a tokenization interest group that we're trying to put together. We just put the proposal out there to the member council, and the purpose of this group is to collect EEA, Enterprise Ethereum Alliance member interests for tokenization as it applies to a horizontal across different industries. For those that are familiar with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, essentially there's different working groups that have different industries in mind. This tokenization interest group is to collect the member interest for where tokens can be, and then develop some kind of charter and shovel it off to the right working group. So if there's anyone interested in joining this group or hearing more about it, send me an email, daniel.norkin@envisionblockchain.com. Happy to hear. And just a quick plug about Envision Blockchain, who we are and why this presentation is relevant to the experience that we've had. So we are a consulting and custom application development organization where we have been developing out applications that have elements of decentralization to them in all different industries. But essentially, as you can see, going from left to right, we have consulting services helping develop out proof of concepts and different MVP rollouts, gathering functional technical requirements, developing out different smart contracts, token development, developing out the UI, the UX. It could even include some ERP implementation, which could come first. And essentially in the middle, you see all the different cloud technologies that we typically include when there's an end-to-end solution. And on the right-hand side, you see our workshops, because we do know that in our industry, we do have to lead through education. So as you can see, the one that's highlighted right here, the blockchain tokenization and standards. This is a workshop that I'm going to discuss a little bit further down, but basically participants of this workshop will be able to understand tokenization as it applies to their use cases, and we'll help you come up with ways to describe how your token should move, what kind of governance comes with that, and what kind of application and use cases could that happen. Again, feel free to reach out to us if any of these apply to you. So the agenda, we're going to break this down in 3 sections. So the first section, easy peasy token stuff. We have a feeling that there's misconceptions around tokens. We're going to make it simple, I hope, to understand what tokens are all about. Number 2, we're going to get into some technical stuff. Number 3, we're going to get into some business stuff. So hopefully, again, that you find some value out of this presentation. So dealing with this easy peasy token stuff. Some of these slides, by the way, are going to come out for those that have been following us for the past couple of years. We were very involved with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance token taxonomy framework. It used to live within the EEA. Recently, it moved over to the IWA, which is another standards organization. So, you know, the content that we're pulling from in some of these slides is really a mixture of the both. But essentially, what are tokens? You can see that tokens essentially is nothing more than a digital representation of something that has some sort of value in your everyday life. It could be physical, could be digital, could have qualities, it could have behaviors, it could be owned, but essentially you need to have this so that it can prove some sort of a value. And we see tokens all day long, but they just exist in the physical world. So we know dollars, everyone knows about dollars. We know about checks. Those that own property know about land deeds. And obviously, probably everyone that has joined this webinar over here knows around digital art. So art or original art, for example, these all are pieces that can be made into tokens, for example. What's interesting is there's this process of moving from something physical to something digital. And as tokenization is concerned, there's this process that we like to follow. It's this framework, a token taxonomy framework. It's a method at which you can understand what you're dealing with from the physical world and how to make it digital. So very simply, reading this from left to a quick introduction is that, first of all, is that you're going to have to come up with a base, right? So a base is something where if you were to pretend, for example, that an asset that you buy in a store is brand new, it's fair to assume that it doesn't matter which one you choose off the shelf. For example, you buy a water bottle, 16 ounces. It doesn't matter if you get the first one or the one behind it. It's basically the same thing. So this concept of a product being interchangeable is what this taxonomy refers to as being fungible. Likewise, if a product or an asset which is not interchangeable, so meaning it's completely unique, that's what's considered non-fungible. And that's essentially where we start with. That's at the base level. So when we move on to behaviors, this is how something moves. So how can you typically interact with this asset? Can others interact with it? Who maintains the asset's ownership? How do you and others that are in your ecosystem, how do they identify it? So these are essentially the behaviors that we like to talk about. Next come to the property sets. And property sets are interesting because this is like some of the metadata, if you will, that exists within this digital token, if you will. So for example, does your asset, right, require the need to store any metadata? If it does, then you're probably going to add a property set to that. And then you're going to want to classify the asset. So for example, oranges and apples are apples, but they're all under fruits. This is just a little primer of how we can start to understand how we can tokenize really anything in our world, anything that needs to be, right? So not saying that we're going to go ahead and tokenize everything, but anything can be tokenized. It's just a matter of being able to describe it. Now, once you come up with these types of descriptions, then you can move on and start developing something. So there's this token taxonomy framework. There's a hierarchy. So what we just showed you, this is a top-down view now. So we typically start with the base. Then you move on to determining if something is fungible or non-fungible. And then it could be divisible, it could be whole, it could be transferable, it could be non-transferable, for example. And then we start to get into this variable inventory, fixed inventory, all the way through dividable, singleton, etc. And then at the lowest level is where we actually have what it is. So for example, if you look on the right-hand side where we're dealing with non-fungible tokens, we have, for example, a vote. We have something like art. But on the left-hand side with fungible tokens, we have something like a stock or loyalty points or fiat currency, for example. Okay, so this is just a little primer on tokens in general and how we're coming up with what's fungible, what's non-fungible, and how we can start to transform something original over to something digital, for example. So what's going on in the news as it relates to non-fungible tokens? It's a madhouse. And in my opinion, it's a madhouse in a really great way because people are making money. People are making a lot of money and they're exploring the different ways that non-fungible tokens can exist right now. So for example, just looking at some of these news articles, and I grabbed this from just a couple of days ago. If you were to take a look at the news right now, there's already going to be new interesting things to read about. But just from the time when I took the screenshot, so for example, Elon Musk said that he'll sell his tweet as an NFT, and the highest bid was over $1.1 million. And Probably anyone that's in the art space knows around the Christie's NFT auction. And Christie's, by the way, is not new by any means. It's a really prestigious art auction. The NFT art auction closed at $69 million by this artist called Beeples. I'm sure that everyone's heard about it that has registered over here. A lot of money is going into this digital art NFT industry. Upper, we have the Atari 3D sneakers, which, to my understanding, it's not even real sneakers. You can buy it and it's like augmented reality. You point it down in your shoes, it'll show you like you're wearing your sneakers. It's like a skin. And then on lower right hand side, so this is a competitor to Christie's. Sotheby's now is entering the NFT digital art market. So this is really interesting to see the way that things are progressing. For those that are involved in tokenization, we didn't see anything like this. We saw CryptoKitties. For those that are familiar with CryptoKitties, we saw CryptoKitties happen. And within the blockchain industry, what we know CryptoKitties for, it was out there and it crashed Ethereum. So it was there and it made the noisy neighbor problem, gas fees, all these technical things. But what it really did was it gave rise to this non-fungible token digital art type of mainstream industry, if you will. So this is really interesting. And then as you start to take a look at just the amount of investments which is happening within this digital art NFT space, this is a pretty cool website that I stumbled upon. It's called Dap Radar. And over here, it shows where some of the money is flowing into. So you can see as far as the volume is concerned, NBA Top Shot is leading. Now, what's interesting about NBA Top Shot is that this is a large organization by all means, right? Everyone knows about the NBA. And instead of dealing with basketball cards, now they have these video moments that are captured and they are sold. And people are investing a lot of money into owning specific moments. So same thing with OpenSea. OpenSea is a whole marketplace where you can make your own NFTs, and we'll get into that next. You can make your own NFTs, you can create them, you can trade them. If you made them somewhere else, you can transfer them on there. OpenSea is providing a marketplace for this kind of business to occur. It's one thing to create an NFT. That's not difficult by any means, and we'll show you how. It's very simple. If you don't have a following, it's going to be very hard for you to sell that. But again, this is just what's happening right now. And the purpose of this webinar now is to show you how you can take these concepts and apply that to your own business. So some of the technical stuff here within this NFT world, okay, we're going to deal with a lot of technical standards, for example. So some of the technical standards is smart contracts. For those that are familiar with ERC smart contracts, these are standard smart contracts. Most of the industry is familiar with ERC-20s, right? These are the cryptocurrency basics, right? So Ethereum itself is an ERC-20 and some of these other ones out there. However, as you could see in the middle, there's an ERC-721, and then there's also an ERC-1155. Now, for those that are familiar with OpenSea that I was just discussing and some other marketplaces, they are leveraging the ERC 1155, while some are still leveraging the ERC 721. Now, I believe that OpenSea gives the user an option whether they want to create the 721 or the 1155, but they do have both options. So here we have just a comparison, right? Because I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. There just are pros and cons that I think that is important for everyone that is in the development world, that is interested in the technical stuff. This is what you want to hear about. So essentially on the left-hand side, you have the 721s where it's limited to non-fungible tokens only. But on the right-hand side, you could see that the 1155 is providing the ability to offer fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens. You only, in the 721, you can only have a single token transfer at the same time. However, in 1155, it supports batch transfers. And I think that's important, especially with gas fees going on right now. It's providing some more efficiencies. The next one I see is just a duplicate. Going down to the next one. So the 721 is that there is a need for a new smart contract for each new type of token that is minted. Whereas on the 1155, it can be deployed in a single smart contract for infinite token types. Again, just a level of efficiency, which is happening from the 1155. There is a notion that the 721 is not that reliable for smart contract triggers. So for example, if you were to create a token, or there would be a token transfer that hits a smart contract, you want that to trigger something else, for example, like a workflow, right? Whereas the 1155 has an upgraded, what is called an on ERC 1155 receive notice, which ensures reliable transfers and triggers. With the 721, there's only support for one language, whereas on the right-hand side, there's a localization of languages for metadata. So it doesn't matter where you are, you could still find that localization. Support for only static metadata, whereas on the right-hand side, you can see the 1155 has these contracts that can point to token URIs in case that any metadata is going to change. I'm going to show you in the next couple slides why that's extremely important. And then, of course, you can see that on the 721, the last one, that it admits transfers and approvals, whereas on the right-hand side, it includes the standardized events. So just keep this in mind if you were to consider whether you're going to use a 721 or 1155. These are some of the points that we go through in our workshopping. When you're dealing with NFTs and there's technical implementation considerations, you really are focused on these two aspects. You really are focused on the blockchain, right? Because you're gonna, what is called creating, or it's minting, you're minting your tokens to a blockchain. It's taking care of the entire accounting aspect of it, which is very important. That's what blockchain was really made for. On the other side of it, it's also important to consider data storage. So for storing information about the NFT, because that's what makes the NFT so special, is that there's metadata behind the NFT that helps you understand how scarce it is or how unique it is or something along those lines. So looking on the OpenSea documents, just wanted to point this out here, and this is why the URL and the URI is important as well. When we're talking about NFT metadata, and again, we're talking about a picture of an octopus right now, right? But we're going to get into some of these next screens in the next couple of slides. Is going to show how we're going to be talking about gemstones. We're going to be talking about documents. We're going to be talking about ecological projects, right? So the metadata behind the token is really, that's where the juice is. So as you can see right here, some of the metadata revolves around this octopus's name. And just looking deeper in here, you see this octopus has some stamina, right? It's like a magic card, right? It got some stamina in it. It's got jelly, how jelly it is. It's funny, but these are the pieces of metadata. What's interesting to think about it is that where is this metadata sitting? This is something you should really consider, right? When you're dealing with your NFT, you need to create metadata around it so that there's some value around this thing. So as you can see right here, that they're showing you that you can connect the metadata, whether you have, for example, a Python server or a Node server or IPFS. Now, for those who don't know about IPFS, the first two that I mentioned, the Python server and the Node server, those are centralized databases, right? IPFS, for those that don't know about it, is a decentralized data store. So there's more decentralization around it. It's scattered around the different nodes that are in the IPFS network. There's a private version, there's a permissionless version, there's a permission version, but we're going to be talking about the public IPFS for just a second. Why should we consider IPFS over a standardized database? Why is this important? It's because remember that we were talking about that you need to point the URL to the NFT, so that if you were to put it on myserver.com, for example, on the left-hand side, Pinata has a really cool website, by the way. So I took this from there. I want to give them a shout out because I'm going to show a demo from their website in just a second. But essentially, you can see on the left-hand side, like myserver.com, it's a grayscale Pinata. But if you were to switch out the NFT, you can keep the same URL. There's no way to actually prove by the URL itself what is the original one. And I'm going to show you the demo in a second. But essentially, if you were to take a look at the CID, which is the, why is the name just skipping my mind right now, the certified identity or the content ID, it gives you the actual hash, which is part of the URL. So if you were to change what that is, it's not the original one anymore. And that's the originality of it, is what makes the NFT, whether it's art or it's a natural gemstone. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and run this demo that we ran earlier this morning here from the Pinata website, which I think is really cool. This is essentially an upload to an IPFS store. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to upload two different Envision blockchain logos. We have an original one that I'm going to go ahead and upload it, and I'm going to give it a name. Just one piece of metadata. I'm just going to give it a name. And you see what's going to happen is it's going to create a hash right there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload a screenshot of that original logo, which we're seeing people do that, right? They're selling their tweets and they're selling the screenshots of their tweets and things like that. I love it. But this is a screenshot logo. I'm going to upload it, and it's going to give you a completely different hash. It's just not the same, and there's no way to change it. You just can't, and it's verified because it's public. So what we can do, we can then upload the original piece, right? Because if you own it, then you own it. You should have it sent to you. And you could see right there that it's verifying what that hash is of the original piece. I think this is really important to note because we do try to stay as decentralized as we can. Okay, just moving forward a little bit. What we just explained with the 721 and the 1155, I just want everyone to know that these are examples of Ethereum standards. Us as a system integrator, we do have to put it out there that we do remain ledger agnostic. We've done implementations on Hyperledger Fabric. We've done implementations on Corda, working on Cardano and Hedera and on Ethereum. Haven't yet gotten to Flow yet, which is probably something that we're going to be taking a look into next. There are other tokenization solutions out there. There are options out there. So for example, there is Hedera Hashgraph, which has its Hedera token service. Flow has its Cadence, which is its version of smart contracts. Just for anyone that hasn't heard of Flow, for example, CryptoKitties that I mentioned earlier and NBA Top Shot, those have migrated off of Ethereum and onto Flow. Cardano, I'm sure that everyone's heard of by now. Cardano also has the multi-asset tokens right now. And Corda, which is a private blockchain, still has a token SDK. So we are familiar with all these out here. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. We will discuss this further during the token workshops. So just to conclude some of the technical considerations that we talk about an app stack and deployment considerations. So for your front end, this is business as usual. This is something everyone is familiar with. You have your React, your Angular, your HTML, your CSS, and all that. That's all there. You still need that. And you're still going to need a back end, right? So you need your file store for your NFT, for your octopus, right? Or for your gemstone, or for your document, or for these other things. However, now you have options. You can use IPFS, which is a decentralized store. You can use SQL. You can use Azure SQL. You can use Python server, Node server, so on and so forth. At the beginning phases, it doesn't necessarily matter. We're talking about POCs, but as you get further into production, there are certain things that we need to consider. Smart contract libraries, these are the things that I was just telling you about. And then obviously your cloud platforms from your Azure, AWSs and GCPs, etc. Okay. So I know that we are just about at the time, but like I said, there's no way I'm getting through this in 30 minutes. So I'm just going to keep rolling. For anyone that wants to stay on, please see. I'm happy I didn't see anybody drop yet. So that's pretty cool. So we're going to keep going. Some of the business stuff. This is where the rubber meets the road. Now, I'm showing this to you backwards in just the way that I thought that the audience would want to see it. Typically, I think that people registered for this webinar because they wanted to hear about NFTs and digital art, and maybe they want to build it on their own. I just wanted to show some of this metadata stuff, the IPFS stuff, some of the technical things first. In the real world, how I think that we do this is that I think that we need to take a business first approach. And this is really where this is coming from. Typically, there's not going to be any technical stuff from here into the end, but you could see how if you understand the business and the definitions that we're going to get through, the development part becomes simpler, and getting your stakeholders on board, this is where it's worth all the grain of salt. We're going to start off light. We're not going to get too heavy yet, but I promise we're going to get deeper. So how businesses could use NFTs marketing. It's as easy as it gets. There was these conferences that we were part of within the past year when people used to go to conferences. Remember those days? Those conferences were giving out NFTs, like swag items, but digital swag items. So for example, you can get a lifetime pass. And I was one of them. I won at the Consensus conference. I actually won a triple ticket. It was awesome. I got the conference pass for Consensus Invest, for Consensus Asia, and Consensus 2020, which didn't happen. And I'm still trying to get that back. But any which way. And then there's other ones. So for example, a very interesting NFT that was just sold for $432,000 was a Rob Gronkowski card on OpenSea, which is like marketing. So with that ticket or with that token, the person that owns that has access to something that nobody else does. They have access to like personal tours, VIP, a couple bucks games, this thing and that. Ownership is a very important thing. So again, this is ownership, right? Okay. Anyway, we're going to get to the next one. And this news just came out, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate it as well as if I was actually reading the article here in front of you. But for example, there's a DeFi protocol coming out called Teller. What they're doing to, in my opinion, to incentivize the early adopters onto their platform is that they're going to have an NFT sale. If you purchase the NFTs, and they haven't, and these NFTs, I believe, are like collectibles and digital art and things like that. I believe that the owners of these NFTs, they have early access to some of the staking profits and things like that Teller is offering. So again, it's not essentially one-to-one with the protocol, but again, they're using NFTs as a way to promote and to get some marketing out there. We know of another organization called the Open Earth Foundation, which is doing a fundraising event right now, and they are having an NFT auction. This is part of marketing. Now, from a business perspective, within this token taxonomy framework that we spoke about before, that started at the EEA, that's now sitting at the IWA, there's this token specification. So what happens is you go through the first naming conventions. You remember that we went through the digital, or we went from the physical to the digital path, when you have to discuss the bases, the properties, behavior sets, etc. There's a formula, and you see there in the bottom, there's that taxonomy formula. Essentially what you do is you start to describe something, and you come up with a formula. You give that formula over to your developers, and now they know exactly what properties this actually needs to happen. So let's just go through this. There's a natural gemstone, and this was actually written out by one of our co-founders here, Jason Panzis. He's very involved with tokenization. I actually call him the chief token officer here, and he has a background actually with gemstones as well. Part of the description around a gemstone is that natural gemstones are physically mined from the earth and are not lab grown or manufactured. Each natural gemstone is whole and one of a kind, and therefore considered to be singleton, as well as non-subdivisible whole tokens with a quantity of one. A natural gemstone can now be represented digitally in this capacity, allowing for only one single owner to process this token at a time. A singleton implies non-subdivisible, so the decimal value for the base token natural gemstone should be 0, and a token quantity be 1. Both are established upon creation. The singleton is transferable, right? So that's the description. And then there's the example also. So for example, this token value type is a direct reference to a natural gemstone. Natural gemstones are whole and one of a kind, making each a singleton and transferable. There are several different types of natural gemstones, such as natural diamonds, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, etc. Natural gemstones are physically mined from the earth and are not lab grown. They are various traits gemologists use in order to differentiate and value every natural gemstone individually. And these are the metadata things that we were talking about. These varying traits define the differences between each type of natural gemstone, making each of them unique. That was long, and thank you for staying with me for that one. But essentially, this is what we're saying with the taxonomy, this taxonomy formula, is that a natural gemstone is a singleton, as you could see over here with the S, and is non-subdivisible and is transferable. So that's where the T comes from. And of course, is a non-fungible token. So that's where the lowercase t and the capital N is at the beginning. You can use this to start to now develop out what you need to from the smart contracts over to the development side. Original art, I'm sure that everyone is familiar with this over here. So I'm just going to go straight to the example that this token could be used to represent an original work of art like a painting. Also, it has the same properties as the natural gemstone: singleton, non-subdivisible, and transferable. A document. Now this is interesting, right? Because a document over here, it's used to represent a document that may be scanned or PDF printed document. It records the document hash to check for tampering, a file path to fetch the file from storage, as well as the ability to be encumbered. The example on the right-hand side is that you can choose this to be an invoice. You can then allow another token or a contract representing a loan or a proof of financing to encumber the document, establishing a link between the two. And when we take a look at the taxonomy formula, you can start to see it's a non-fungible token that is singleton. That's the S. Indivisible. It's got the wavy symbol and the D. It's transferable, burnable, encumberable. That's with the B and the E. And then here's the property set. Remember that we're talking about the property set. So the property set is the plus and the PH, and then that's where you get the file from. So again, this is the definition. This is the token definition for a document. Again, I'm stressing that this is the early phases of understanding how to define the tokens within your business. It just so happens that we're cherry picking the NFTs because that's the hot thing right now. But as you can see right now, that we're not talking about digital art anymore, right? We're talking about documents, talking about invoices, talking about gemstones and rubies and such. Ecological Project. Now this one is a little bit in depth over here, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially you have a ecological project. That ecological project is very specific. So I'm going to jump straight to the example, is that this non-fungible token could represent a farm that will be issuing both greenhouse gas, the GHG, carbon, and water benefit claims on their sustainable farming practices. The token represents the project on the network and contains detail about the module benefit projects, which is MBP, carbon and water, which is where its benefits claims are posted for verification. A verification contract is used to verify the MBP claims that could result from the generation of a carbon credit by the verifier that would belong to the owners or owner of the project after issuance. So for example, there's a project and now there's going to be benefits that come from that project, and all of this is all part of the metadata that we were talking about before. So this is, again, a non-fungible token that's divisible, that's the D, transferable, the T, burnable, that's the B, and then we have the ecological project information. Again, it's the metadata about the project, which is the first plus PH EPI plus the modular benefit project. So for example, the benefits are going to be carbon and water and things like that. Last that we're going to cover over here is around a diploma. This is also very simple to understand. I'm not going to go through the description. But the example here is it's the same thing as a driver's license as well. And an education diploma is issued to a student and is not and cannot transfer to someone else. So the taxonomy formula is very simple. Again, it's a non-fungible token, the T and the N, and then you have it's a singleton, it's non-subdivisible, non-transferable, but it needs to be attestable, and that's what the A is. So you still need to be able to prove that the diploma was earned and that then can be attested, for example, by the university. The way that we come about all this, and I keep referring back to this token workshop, is there's this series of questions, or for example, the ecosystem governance is what we like to call it. There was a project that we were involved with within the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. It was called the Trusted Rewards Token. It dealt with loyalty rewards. It wasn't non-fungible tokens. It was all fungible, except for maybe the reputation token, but we can talk about that later. But essentially, this right here was the way that the project was started. Before any sort of development happened, there was this conversation around all the stakeholders. There was around who should control the token grant, when, how, and where. So what the process is for sharing. And then there's a whole process around issuing, and a whole process around vesting, and a whole process around the redemption or the burning, et cetera, like that. So again, from a business perspective, we want to be able to understand the entire ecosystems and the way that the tokens are going to flow through everything. So this is extremely important. And as it relates to, again, the token taxonomy initiative, what it was back then, there was a token taxonomy initiative workshop, actually just a little bit over a year ago. One of probably one of the last conferences that happened over here, as you could see. So we took all the participants and we had them go through the entire, think of something within your organization, and we're going to come up with the base, and we're going to come up with the behaviors and the property sets and everything. And we had the whole workbook all set up for everyone so that they can take it back to their leadership and start to discuss this without having the need for development. This is a straight business conversation, business first conversation, maybe a little bit of technicals, because, you know, today's CTOs do have to understand business processes. Just some food for thought over here. And that's about it. Some of the next steps here that would we recommend, that if anyone has any interest around some of the things that we were talking about over here, we definitely recommend that you send us a note. We provide this one-day workshop for enterprise blockchain tokenization, where we can go through these questions there with you, help you understand from a business first perspective what needs to be developed, help plan that whole thing out. But for those that maybe came into this conversation because they are interested in actually building a marketplace for NFTs, this is something that we can also assist with. So feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to join you on your path. That's about it here for today. I know I went around 15 minutes over the scheduled time, but I think that mostly everyone stayed until the end, and I really appreciate that. Look, everybody, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. Keep your eyes posted. We usually do these type of webinars on the last Wednesday or Thursday of every month. So until then, we'll talk to everyone soon. Take care.